Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast presented by Zwift. Benji fresh off a Zwift race, I believe. We'll hear more about that in a second. We've got the Paris-Nice-Tirreno Adriatico doubleheader recap, TTT in Paris-Nice with different rules. It's a 32k flat TT, 2 corners, not very technical except for the final is in town, few curves in the last 2 kilometers, but the rules, what is it? The first rider sets the time, the best time, or the team's time, but then every other rider sets their own GC time. Is that right?
Correct. That's the rule. Back in the day, it was the 4th rider that did so. So that's why in the past in team time trials, you'd see 4 riders arrive at the finish line together. But this time around, it's a single rider that can decide that team's time. And it doesn't change much for the GC riders, eh? They need to be in the first riders that finish, if not the first rider that finishes, if they only finish with 1 rider. So that doesn't change much, but I was curious what the new intriguing strategies could be that we'd see, because I wasn't expecting all out different things, but maybe the final 3 kilometers would be played differently, because otherwise, when there's 4 riders left in usual team time trials, you'd see them just try and stick together. But here, we might see lead-outs and so forth. That's what I had in mind, at least going into this team time trial. And I'll throw it back to you. What did you think of that new idea going into it?
I thought it was good. Well, actually, no, I had no strong view on it beforehand, but then watching the race, I thought it was pretty exciting. It added a little bit to it. It definitely, some teams had different strategies depending on the teams they had, their relative strengths. Jumbo-Visma came in the very hot favourites. They have, multiple world champion Rowan Dennis in the TT, world champion currently in Tobias Foss in the TT, Van Hooydonk, Tratnik, Vingegaard, Affini. Who else? Coy. Sprinters are usually not bad in a TTT. Red hot favourites, and they only win by 1.5 seconds ahead of EF Education Easy Post with, I'll say it for him, frenemy of the podcast, a much smaller budget at EF Education Easy Post, nearly snatching this with Magnus Cort. Jaco Alula third, only 4 seconds behind Jumbo-Visma, again with maybe half or less of the budget. Groupama FDJ fourth. I mean, David Godu could be rubbing his hands together. There was a TTT, not an ITT. UAE, though. Well, I'll stop here. 34.18, only 23 seconds slower than Jumbo, Benji. That's a win for UAE.
For certain, that's definitely a great time for them. You actually said yesterday that would be less than the 45 seconds I would have guessed initially, but it was better than 45 seconds. It's basically half of that. So a really good time by UAE and also by the teams ahead of that. But you're mentioning budget there for a second. We've had one team time trial in UAE. We have another one here. We've got another team time trial somewhere in the Vuelta. I'm not even sure it's the Vuelta where the Barcelona, team time trial is. So then I'm questioning, if there's only 3 team time trials in a year, which teams actually invest money of that budget in trying to get their teams good at this? Because this is not something that happens often, eh? And it's not necessarily in the big goals.
I think it's also an effort thing, like who's trained it. I think EF have obviously drilled it pretty well. Jumbo, I know, drill it. And maybe other teams like Trek, who do have some decent firepower, do have a decent budget, they haven't really drilled it. Or Israel, I presume, didn't practice it at all. But it's also the riders you can afford as well. So bigger budget means you can have bigger, more powerful riders, all things else being equal, one would think. So, and it's also still the investment in individual time trial equipment. So EF go well in ITTs too. That plays a part. Obviously, you need to have a fast setup, but there's also how you approach the TT and all that jazz. So, to be honest, Jumbo won, but I've not been overwhelmed by any of their TTs so far this year. Like, I know at UAE, the team was like Koos and Globe and stuff. It was still worse than I expected. Yesterday in Tirreno, Kelderman and Roglic were quite a bit, they were behind Almeida.
Yep.
Like, Roglic, even at 95%, should be the same time as Almeida. So, they're not setting the world on fire so far this year with their TTs. There's been some equipment changes, wheels, pedals, cockpit. Maybe I don't know about the cockpit. I'm not a tech head.
Is it because Jumbo maybe went backwards in that, or is it because UAE has caught up? Because I feel like UAE has made a step forward because Almeida was not doing these time trials last year. Then again, he wasn't doing those time trials either earlier in this year. So he might just be coming better in form.
I mean, he took a wrong turn in the Vuelta last year. I mean, I don't know how much time that cost him. Jayco, what the giant setup is fucking fast.
Yeah.
What their entire setup, and I think they use the Vortex Silverstone speed suits at Jayco. At least Simon Yates has one on. They are slippery. And also, I think I'll round out the top 10. And by the way, or a few more other teams. Broe on 34.20 in 6th. Soudal Quickstep ahead of Trek Segafredo. Pedersen loses the jersey. Bahrain lose about 48 seconds. Would Vingegaard in a 32k TT he'd put more than 48 into Hague, so I think Hague's got to be happy sort of with that. Ineos 34.43. Let's stop there, Benji. That is, I mean, they just won the stage, Jumbo. Pretty harsh criticism, being like, I was underwhelmed by it. Ineos is much worse, Benji.
Yeah, it's a pretty terrible time compared to what we would have expected. But then again, I was expecting an EF and Jayco to come out very high on top, but I was expecting Ineos to at least be beating a Trek Segafredo or a Bahrain here on paper, a Bora on paper, and especially Soudal Quickstep, who were losing 2 of their riders already with 27k to go. 5 kilometers in, they were losing 2 riders.
Start.
Yeah, but then again, we saw that same issue with the top teams where Jumbo-Visma and UAE Team Emirates both at the same time, 1 minute and 20 seconds into their team time trial roughly, there was a corner where the wind kind of changed. And at UAE, Grosjean was having trouble actually off the back for a bit, had to crawl back. And Jumbo-Visma had a less obvious issue, but Dennis was also having some trouble in that same corner trying to get to the last wheel again. So it seems like that corner caught a few teams off guard, and especially those 2 top teams where I noted that thing. But there were also very different strategies between the teams, or at least for the majority of the first half, you wouldn't notice much difference, right? It's the second half of the team time trial where teams kind of diverted, no?
Yeah, so some teams kept their team together. Like Ineos really kept their team together, like 6-7 riders together in the last kilometre just about. Jumbo-Visma basically did a sprint lead out. They kept 6 riders together. Coy dropped off a little bit earlier, maybe after the intermediate time check. And then they did effectively a sprint lead out. What was curious to me was, Benji, it was Affini, Dennis, Foss did the death pulls before, and it was Tratnik finishing with Vingegaard and Van Hooydonk finishing with Vingegaard. I don't know if they were trying to get Van Hooydonk into the jersey because he took bonus seconds, 2 of them yesterday, and that was why he stayed with Jonas. Otherwise, shouldn't he be spending all his energy to launch Jonas solo?
I agree. And if that is the reason, I don't know if that is the reason, but if that is the reason, if they wanted to do that for Nathan Van Hooydonk, it's nice for a team dynamic, but in reality, it's kind of taking away from the goal of Vingegaard. Yeah. So I would say that would be a meh idea to have before this team time trial. Now, when it comes to that strategy, Matthews was still there after taking bonus seconds at the previous intermediate. Yesterday, with Pogacar winning that intermediate, he was second, so also bonus seconds there. With Bex, I do understand that they try and get more out of it, because Yates might not necessarily be fighting with Jonas and Tadej for the victory, but more for the podium, while, I don't know, Simon Yates can actually do well in a 1-week race.
I disagree with it with Jayco as well, to be honest. Yeah? I think Simon Yates he won the final stage last year. He's anything less than the podium GC here for Yates is a massive underperformance. The guy can climb with the best of them in 1 week. His problem is consistency. The TT was shit hot. It's the same thing. I don't know. Maybe they've done the maths and they want to finish with 3 or 2. UAE didn't, Benji. UAE did the opposite strategy. Sorry, I cut you off. They launched Pog.
Exactly. And I said it earlier, Grosjean was in trouble early on, but then they stayed together for a bit longer. And basically, with 10 kilometers to go, they got their 6th rider out of there. So they had 5 riders left with 10k to go. With 5k to go, roughly 4 riders left. So they were dropping riders off much quicker than Jumbo-Visma. I'll do the comparison in a second. 5k to go, 4 riders left for for Pogacar's team. Then 3K to go, 3 riders left. So that's still 3 kilometers to go. And they're already with Pogacar and 2 other domestiques. 1 kilometer to go, 1.5-ish roughly. And then we have 2 riders left. So then you've got Bjerg basically doing his death pool ahead of Pogacar. So they did their death pools from way earlier than Jumbo-Visma did in this. So you would basically see Bjerg doing a massive lead out for Pogacar, who launches the last like 500, 400 meters, maybe a bit longer than that, and just try to sprint it for the last 500 meters. And it was awesome to see. Is it more efficient than Jumbo's strategy, who basically had 5 riders left with 1.2 kilometers to go, and in the last kilometer started doing that lead out, because with 900 meters to go, they had 4 riders left. And at 350 meters, Jumbo tried to go with Tratnik past Vos, who had done his lead out, and I felt like Tratnik was kind of getting blocked in the corner by Vos.
Closed the door on him.
Was accidental, obviously, but it might have
relegation.
cost half a second. Relegation. Falls out.
I agree. I think he should have opened up the inside to Tratnik. It's the horses you have. Maybe UAE strategy, like mathematically, right? Jonas is a better ITT rider on a hilly course than Nathan van Hooijdonk.
Yeah.
But if Van Hooijdonk's been able to stay in the wheels, or someone like that, or a Feeney, they weigh like 20 kilos more than him. They can pull. We're talking 60 kph here. Jonas is not better than them. Whereas Pogacar, he's at a risk of guys slowing him down because he is got the biggest horsepower in that team.
You think that explains the strategy of the last few hundred meters then for Jumbo-Visma, where Vingegaard couldn't actually get past Tratnik in the final stretch?
I think so. I think Jumbo's is like on paper the most, and Ineos did the same, and Jayco did something similar the most. Maybe Jayco dropped a couple more off. They spent Broe earlier, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's like mathematically the most efficient one, but if you have a huge ability disparity between your 5th and 4th rider, like UAE do, and your best rider like Pog, I mean, the counterpoint to that is Pog, and I think he was guilty of this, Pog was pulling a little bit too sharply, and he should have just been taking longer pulls during the race to allow his teammates to recover more. That's the counterpoint. You need to go through the maths. Not my job. But Benji, when you were Zwifty, yes, that was kind of your job. Tell me about this Zwift race, by the way, speaking of death pools.
Well, it was a pretty big death pool, I can assure you, because this week I'm basically doing my first Zwift stage race. I've done one Zwift race before a few months ago, and I was like, this morning I stood up and I was like, I see this race on the calendar, 6-day stage race, part of the Chasing Tour, some concept where they kind of emulate the real-life World Tour races, but on Zwift. So I'm doing the Chasing d'Azur. I think we can all guess what stage race that is trying to emulate. I'm guessing Paris-Nice. But when it comes to that race, it starts off at a time trial. So I did my 18.1 kilometer time trial, and I can assure you it was a rough job. But I'm definitely not lost, but I don't know my time yet because there's like multiple time zones where the race is written. So by the end of the day, I should know where I finished in my individual time trial. So I'm very curious, but it was a devastating experience. But let's be honest about it. Tirreno was ongoing and it wasn't very interesting. So it was a good decision to jump on Zwift instead.
In this Paris-Nice race, we thought Nathan van Hooijdonk was going into the leader's jersey. EF got very little camera time. They were down at the intermediate. They were 5th at the intermediate, and first they beat Jumbo by 9 seconds from T1 to the finish. By the way, 32k TT, I'm going to need an additional intermediate time check. 1.8 enough. That is fucking hell, like, you're just screen watching, not knowing how guys are going. I want one at 10k, 20k finish. Thank you. If you could make that happen.
Every kilometer.
Organizers. If that's technically feasible, probably increase the cost of the race. Cort goes into the leader's jersey, so and this is the counterpoint, Benji, for EF, wearing yellow in Paris-Nice for a day is worth something, and the chance of Paulus winning this race overall is not the same as Simon Yates or Jonas Vingegaard. So Cort dropping Paulus, and Paulus therefore getting a worse GC time, is worth it for Cort, and it was the difference. Cort going into the leader's jersey by a solitary second because he took 4 bonus seconds in the sprint yesterday. He takes it. Matthews third on 3 seconds. Maybe for Jayco it would have been worth. Nah, I believe in Yates GC. And yeah, so Matthews is on 3 seconds. And I'm just trying to do the now where so Jonas is 4 seconds ahead of Yates. That's dangerous for Jonas because I think Yates is really good. And Pogacar is only, my maths is so bad, 11 seconds behind Vingegaard. 11 seconds, Benji. That's bonus territory.
That's less than Jumbo-Visma would have wanted, I think, after this team time trial. I think they were hoping at a gap of 20, 25 seconds at least after this team time trial, because if you look at tomorrow's parkour, they have like an intermediate sprint with like 10k to go and then 10 bonus seconds on top of the final climb as well. So that 16 seconds that Pogacar can take, if Vingegaard is second, then he's getting, oh god, Mav 6 plus 4 is 10 seconds. So that's 6 seconds that I think if Vingegaard can stay on second for every single one of these intermediate sprints, which he doesn't so far, and he can get second at the finish line behind Pogacar tomorrow, then he can stay within enough contention that it will be decided on like the big climbing stage and the final stage. But I think they would have hoped for more knowing the intermediate sprints, no?
Yeah, but Poggy going to win the final stage.
I think so as well.
So it's trouble. And I haven't looked at let me have a look at the intermediate quickly for the final stage. That's going to be really tough for them to control, but it's another sprint. And so
flat as well.
It's a flat-ish sprint, yeah. It does come after the Côte d'Épée, so but even if it's a reduced GC group, Pog going to win that. So Jumbo, it's going to be very tricky for them. Let's talk about tomorrow's stage, and we'll talk about maybe some of the strategies they should employ. I would say, just to round out this TT, the winners would be David Gaudu GC. Danny Martinez GC would be not a winner. Jorgensen, I mean, Movistar 50 seconds behind. Not bad, not terrible. Could have been worse. But Jorgensen's still in the fight. Anyway, he's still on for top 10. Tomorrow's stage, 165 km from Saint-Amand-Montrond to La Loge des Gardes. That's French for you. It is rolling terrain for the first 110 kilometers. Then they do a Cat 3, 2K, 6%, and the Côte de Cheval-Lyon, 6Ks, 4%. None of these are very terrifying. Then the Col de Beaulouis, 3K, no, 9Ks, 4%, not very difficult. There's the intermediate sprint on top of that. It has Pogacar's name on it. It's very similar to the one on stage 1. Then a descent, not very difficult, before La Loge des Gardes, which is 7K, 7%, very regular. The 6th kilometer is 4%. The first 4Ks are a little bit more difficult, and then the final K is 7%. This is like made in a factory, this stage, for Pogacar. If I'm Jumbo, and it's going to be difficult because they're up there on GC, that's the problem when they're up there on GC, but you got to get Vos and Tratnik in the break.
Well, when you look at this parkour, it's very difficult to like make the break you want if you're Jumbo. Because if you're Jumbo, you first of all don't want to chase the breakaway during the day. You want the break to win. And secondary, you want riders in it so the break potentially wins and keeps that break going for the majority of the stage. But UAE knows that. So UAE will do everything they can with a Trentin and Wellens, I think, early on to try and make sure that the Tratnik and the Vos can't go into that breakaway. So I think the camp is in UAE to control the breakaway phase. If they can achieve that, then a not so dangerous breakaway goes. Because that's a scenario that UAE wants, and that's a scenario that the Jumbo should try and break. They don't want an easy breakaway to go here because the break should try and take the bonus seconds. That's the goal of Jumbo. UAE wants that break destroyed by the time the intermediate sprint arrives, right? That's the two scenarios, right?
At worst for Jumbo, at worst, they need that break caught after the intermediate sprint.
Yeah.
Because you can't have Pog taking 6 plus maybe 10. And I'm assuming Jonas will take bonus seconds at the finish. It's not like we saw in Gran Camino, the guy has serious punch too, but the intermediate sprint is actually more difficult for him, where it's so easy that we can see someone like Godon powerless beating Jonas in that sprint and he takes no seconds. So yeah, it's going to be, because EF don't want Vos and Tratnik in the break either. Why would they?
is there an opportunity for a late attack going into that intermediate sprint, like with 1K to go, like Affini style in that stage in the Giro in the past where Nizzolo was there? I don't think Affini can do it because it's kind of after an uphill section, not the hardest uphill section, so he might still be there. But I just feel like UAE will know that that's possible. They should see that coming.
They should, and I think UAE's team is better than Jumbo's here.
Yeah,
I think Jumbo have some riders in Tirreno that would be more useful for this stage. Dylan van Baarle, Thijs Benoot, Attila Valter. And we saw on stage 1, Benji, one 500-meter 12% climb, one Jumbo rider in a group of 30, Jonas Vingegaard. So that doesn't bode well for stage 8. And I guess the rationale for that was to bring a stacked squad to win the TTT, which they just did, by the way. And they have eliminated Ineos, but Wellens, Oliveira, Novak, Trentin look really good.
Start list wise, they based everything so hard on the team time trial that when it comes to these stages, and crosswinds, but when it comes to these stages, they don't necessarily have the strength then anymore if that team time trial doesn't get the gap that they wanted, which I think hasn't had the gap that they wanted on UAE. So I think they're in a bit of a shitty position like that. I think Pogacar takes both the bonus seconds on the intermediate sprint and wins the stage afterwards.
I think so. I think the intermediate's too close to the finish, 17 Ks at the end of a hill. It's just going to take putting Rui Oliveira on the front. So EF going to control the break because it's important for them to try and show the jersey. The break is going to be at a minute. Oliveira Novak will pace super hard so that they get back before the intermediate. That's how I see it happening.
Do you think Magnus Kort is crazy enough to fight for the intermediate sprint, knowing that it might benefit Paulus in some shape or form? Then again, Paulus won't ever beat Pogacar in GC, so that point doesn't make any sense.
If I was Kort, I would go for the intermediate sprint.
Yeah.
I would. And then I would try and hope that the final climb is paced really slow.
Yeah.
And try hold on. And then go in the break or something tomorrow. That's what I would do. Because, like, EF having yellow does matter to them. But I agree with you. I think Pog wins the stage. I don't really see how he doesn't. This sort of climb's perfect for him.
Ideally for Jumbo-Visma, EF is in the breakaway with Kort.
With Kort?
Yeah.
Tomorrow. But he's in yellow.
He's done it before,
it's illegal.
Van Avermaet has done it before. I think Kort will try. 100%. I see it happening.
He actually should. Because whilst I just said, he can try and hang on the climb, he ain't. He's going to get gapped on the climb when the GC guys on the last K really launch it. If it was 3K 7%, 3K 6%, it's different. But 7K 7% is too hard with these quality of guys. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. The final, I think we should be grateful, Benji, because Jonas is going to have to try and drop Pogacar on stage 7 on the mountain stage.
He'll have to, which is good for content.
Hopefully. All right, that was Paris-Nice. If we've missed anything, let us know. Danny Martinez, Ineos. Hopefully he can, maybe Ineos go on the break tomorrow because they're behind on GC. I'm not sure, but yeah. Good day for UAE. I mean, good day for a lot of teams. Simon Yates, the dark horse for GC. Maybe he is the danger. I am the danger. But yeah, Paris-Nice is building, and I like the TTT concept. I think every TTT should be like that.
But I think it would be nice to have this specific concept in a team time trial. Like I think Kung said it, where there's like a climb towards the end, so that you've got the proper lead out on the climb for Pogacar. Oh no, that's very tactical.
Yeah. Then what? That's where you can see some interesting stuff.
The first 5K is uphill.
Yeah. Rick Zabel sprints for KOM points and then insta drops and got over the rest of the TTT. Maybe on a Heilinger. That's hill in Dutch. Rick Zabel knows
We're not going back to
There's
this.
KOM points on top of them. Okay. That was Paris-Nice. Hope you enjoyed it.